Hey there, it's Admiral Teague. Welcome to the 1923 recap and review for Season 2, Episode 3. The title's Wrap Thee in Terror. The third episode of Season 2 of 1923 had struggle and endurance along with a theme of disillusionment for some characters, especially Liz. Episode 3 was shocking to me as a reviewer for one reason. It was kind of mediocre for the first time ever. The show did things that it had previously avoided. This was a typical third episode of a streaming show, with the kind of slow plotting nature more common to MCU or Disney Star Wars third episodes. It was sort of marking time, and we mostly just reinforced things we already knew. It was still a pretty dark episode in its own right that seemed to be merely setting the stage for a big episode 4, which is a feature of streaming shows' third episodes rather than a bug. Streaming shows can sometimes be too focused on getting you to renew that subscription, and the third episode is pretty slow more often than not. This can really expose a bad show. The lack of events gives you too much time to think. And think I did. So please, hit those like and follow buttons. Maybe turn on that notification bell, and I'll get you up to speed on 1923. The third episode of Season 2 is almost exclusively focused on the female characters, some of whom we haven't heard much from this season, so we kind of needed to catch up anyway, and the episode was still pretty good, with Alex making it to New York and Spencer advancing as far as Oklahoma. Somewhere, outside Bozeman, we find out Jake Dutton and the rest have survived the blizzard, and in maybe the only upbeat moment of this entire episode, he motivates Zane to work through his pain for the sake of his family. It's an effective scene. Back at the Yellowstone ranch, we can see the Joker Wolf didn't make it. Rip to this amazing one-episode villain. Kara's fine, by the way. She's now taken out 2 CGI animals in 3 episodes. Way to go, Kara! Liz continues her painful rabies treatments. They're looking like the final straw in what's been a really rough ride for this character. At her wit's end, Liz tells Jack she can't endure Montana anymore and is head back east to Boston, with or without him. Alex arrives in America and attempts to enter via Ellis Island, and it's pretty clear that the CGI budget went to the Joker Wolf and the other predators, so I won't complain too much. Ellis Island is a chapter in the history of a great many Americans, and the look at the way citizenship and immigration worked in 1923 is still interesting. Alex is still getting used to being just another person, and she scoffs at the treatment she's given. After various indignities that more or less make sense to us 102 years later, it's clear she's at her wit's end by the time she reaches the end of her ordeal. Having something of a meltdown on the final immigration official, she speaks of how the Statue of Liberty looks down from Liberty Island onto Ellis Island. This is 100% true. Ellis Island is just a few hundred yards from Liberty Island. That they reference but never show the Statue of Liberty is a pretty good example of how the show addresses Alex's trip through New York. Alex meets all 5 people who live in New York City without running into a single person with a New York accent. All of them basically tell her the same thing. This city is very dangerous. Don't talk to anyone. The entire time spent in New York is slightly preposterous. It's filled with people who have Texas accents. Taylor Sheridan seems unaware of the geography of Manhattan or its cosmopolitan nature. The Ellis Island and Grand Central Station sets or location shoots were really good, though. Take it from a guy who's been through Grand Central Station all the time. When we part ways with Alex, she's off to Boston with young Emilio Estevez stalking her. We touch base with Runs' horse, and after a quick chat, it looks like Tiona and her friends will be joining those friendly cowboys in an old-fashioned cattle drive. Spencer and Luca are not very far away from where Tiona or the Montana Law Posse are, and after making a heartfelt plea to Luca not to try to run booze through the roadblock, the two part ways. As Spencer looks for a train station, he witnesses Luca's end. Luca's blind loyalty to his family, which mirrors Spencer's, has cost him everything. Spencer's visibly moved. We'd seen Spencer save this character from his own self-destructive instincts earlier, so it's easy to understand what he's going through to see Luca come to such a sad, pointless, and avoidable end. That brings us to the most troubling new character. In episode 2, we met Marshall Faucett, played by Jennifer Carpenter. Her character shocked me with anachronistic Annie Oakley clothes from at least 30 years earlier and a front-carried six-shooter love gun. She looked a little ridiculous and had been given a sort of harsh makeover from what we're used to. Marshall Faucett is definitely a girl boss and the first female character to show up pretty stunning and brave right out of the box. In 1883, Elsa Dutton is believable and strong because we see her overcome challenges. Faucett shows up without us seeing her origin, so you gotta wonder if there's any acceptance to be had for female characters whose origins we don't see after years and years of low-quality, woke girl bosses who beat down guys with sheer physical force. It's possible people, myself included, have seen it just too much for it to be enjoyable. Taylor Sheridan certainly seems to have tried to soften the impact of the arrival of this girl boss. Carpenter's performance is good enough, and she's telling it like it is to the three most loathsome people we know, Marshall Kent and the rest of the posse from Montana. They're horrible people who have shown a real lack of morality throughout the story. Father Renault is the least despicable of them, and he's taken a few lives, both very coldly as well as in a hot-blooded rage in Episode 2, where the Guardians took out Kent's deputy Ross before Kent and Father Renault turned the tables on them. We know Jennifer Carpenter from Dexter, and like I said, her performance is good, but the character is about 20 years too early for a female federal marshal, so historically, we're all over the place. Fortunately, Taylor Sheridan seems to have had something of an epiphany, and when we see Faucett, which we really didn't need to, he has a much less outlandish look this week, though she's still front carrying a pistol while riding, which doesn't look great. It's pretty obviously a resin prop gun, and the second really fake-looking sidearm of this episode. I predict that Spencer, Tiona, Marshall Faucett, and the Montana posse are all on a collision course, because right now they're in the same general area. If I had to guess, Marshall Kent is so evil, his character needs to pay a rather high price for his actions. Father Renault does as well, though it's possibly to a lesser degree. I feel like we'll see them meet their fate in Episode 4. I also think Faucett will somehow convince Spencer to at least take Tiona with him to the Yellowstone. Then hopefully we'll see no more of this character, and we'll see if Faucett is perhaps a backdoor pilot to have a show of her own. We never catch up to the villains back in Montana this week, and it's something that hurts this episode. The bad history, the inaccurate missed opportunities in New York, and the failure to check in with Creighton and Whitfield all hurt Episode 3. It's still worlds better than the tripe served up by Disney or modern Star Trek, but this is easily the least enjoyable 1923 episode so far. So with Episode 3 being somewhat lackluster and getting a series low B from me as a grade, we await the events of Episode 4, which is titled Journey the Rivers of Iron. I'm guessing that since two of our characters are on or headed to a train from Montana, that's an allusion to rail travel. Episode 3 is pretty enjoyable still, but it's showing the shortcomings and problems I've seen in other streaming shows. Again, it's the first time I've seen it in this series. I guess it had to happen sooner or later. Episode 4 will most likely feature some kind of preliminary showdown between the Duttons and the forces of Whitfield, whether Spencer makes it back in time or not. While the episode wasn't bad, it was about 10 minutes longer than the rest of them and slower all around. It was not a burden to watch, but it just isn't as good as episodes 1 or 2, and season 2 is turning out to be maybe just not quite as good as season 1. So I hope you'll consider hitting those like and follow buttons. I'm your buddy Admiral Teague. I'll see you out there.